like transform. Who knows? Hi, Sophie. Creo que eres la única que está conectada. I'm trying to get the right chroma key, but I can't seem to get it, like, right. Okay, let me see. Hold on. Okay. Okay, we're gonna wait just a little bit more so that we can get all these people in the class. Say present at least so that I can see who is here. Sophie, can you hear me clearly, loud and clear? Because I'm using this microphone and I want to know if it's totally working. I do what I can, but I can't do much. I'm gonna be here. Okay. Let me see. Ah, tan bonitos todos. Okay, guys, let's begin. I know you are kind of like lost. I'm like trying new stuff, but let's see if it works. Okay, so let's begin, guys. Today is May 14th, and we're gonna talk about, we've been talking about the GDP, remember? And we have been saying that, well, it's very, very important for us to know the GDP and what it measures. Just let me remind you, it measures the growth of a country and is the real dollar value of all the income and the earnings within a territory, okay? And also we have to keep in mind that it does not include intermediate goods, it doesn't include the transaction costs, and it doesn't include anything that comes from the informal economy, okay? So whatever is drug trafficking or smuggling, it's not included in the GDP, okay? So today we're gonna talk about the business cycles, all right? And so here you have the screen. Hold on a second. I'm gonna get my OBS open. Yeah. Alrighty then. So we're gonna go ahead and talk about the business cycles and how they work. Okay, it's basically about the GDP. Okay, it's basically about the GDP. Here, if you can see here, the weather is the business cycle is this graph here that represents the growth of the gross domestic product. And we have talked about the GDP enough. If anybody is just lost in space and doesn't know what the GDP is, please write me so that I can talk to you in separate, okay? So here we have a graph that in the y-axis, we're going to have the GDP, the real GDP. And then on the x-axis, we're going to have time. So the real GDP over time gives you a growth rate. And that is going to tell us if the economy is growing. Remember that the 3 goals of the economy, here I had them. Okay, remember that was last class. The 3 major goals of the economy was to promote economic growth, to limit unemployment, and to keep prices stable. That is to keep inflation down, okay? So these being the 3 goals of any economy, we want to keep this line in a very nice slope upward. We don't want it going down, okay? Now, what happens is that in some economies, we have that they grow very fast and that they grow very slow. If you have a very fast growing economy, the slope is higher and that gives you a more inclined curve, just like the one you're seeing in the, in the left side of your screen. And then if an economy is growing very slow, it's more like a horizontal line because the slope diminishes, right? Because it's the growth of real GDP over time. So that means we've been recording the GDP over time for whatever country or whatever, whatever country, nation we're examining, okay? So then we have by year's fluctuation. If we are recording and we're putting like line by line, dot by dot, what the indicator gives me, okay, the GDP in 2010, the GDP in 2011, and so on and so forth until I get to 2020, okay, I'm gonna get a graph, and I connect the dots, I'm gonna get a graph kind of like this, okay, like this, here. And then, to simplify things, we have come up with the business cycle being graphed like in curves, like this one here, okay, here, over there, okay, and it's like a sine and cosine graph in which I go up, I go down, I go up, I go down, all right? That's kind of like, we want it like that because it reflects the pattern. We are following a pattern. We're not only connecting the dots and they go in a very disorganized manner, but we're connecting the dots and we are having like a curve. We're making a pattern. That's why we have the simplified graph, and that is what we're gonna call the business cycle. What is it built off? The GDP, okay? The GDP over time. That's very important for you to know. Where do we get these graphs, or where do we get this information? From the real GDP. We graph the real GDP over time, and that is going to give you the business cycle of your country, of your state, or whatever, okay? All right. So then we're going to write in our little notebook, please, okay, the definition for business cycle. It's right there. And we have to draw these, this cycle because it has, we're going to see each of the phases of the business cycle. And each of them are going to have very specific characteristics that are going to tell you how the economy, the providers, the sellers, the consumers are behaving. Obviously, depending on this graph or based on this graph, we can foresee, we can forecast a recession. It hasn't been always effective. It hasn't always been effective, as you can see, but it works sometimes, okay? And the more that we can foresee and that we can forecast these type of changes, then we're gonna be able, as a government, we're talking on behalf of the government. If you have noticed, macroeconomics is talking a lot on behalf of the government. We can take good decisions. Remember the 2 major purposes, the 2 major functions of macroeconomics study? It was to measure the health of the economy and also to guide the decisions of economic policy within a year, within a period of time, inside some specific country. Okay, so here we have the definition. Is a business cycle is a fluctuation in the gross domestic product that we have just mentioned around its long-term natural growth rate. It explains the expansion and contraction in economic activity that an economy experiences over time. Okay, this is very important. Explains the expansion and contraction. Expansion and contraction. An economy may grow, an economy may contract. So I'm going to give you 1 minute so that you can put that definition down and before we go forward, right? Let me see if you have any comments. Qué bonitos. Okay, there it is, so that you can have it in your notes. Okay, so a business cycle is a cycle of fluctuations. Fluctuations are changes in the GDP around its long-term natural growth rate. It explains the expansion and contraction in economic activity that an economy experiences over time. And now, while you finish writing, just mentioning, we have already talked about it, but I like to repeat it. The GDP growth rate is calculated by having the actual GDP as your 100% and the GDP number 2 being the change. And so you subtract the second one minus the first one, and you calculate how much that difference is from the first total, and that's your growth rate, your GDP growth rate. All right, so that's where we're getting the numbers from. Okay, I'm gonna go forward, and we are gonna have we're gonna have two effects why GDP may change or why GDP may grow, or you can go down in a slump. Okay, we have static effects on one side. Those are, for example, changes in the free market conditions. Let's say when Mexico signed the TLC, the NAFTA, the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement with Canada and United States, well, we had a change in the free market conditions. Or let's say that during World War II, Japan put an embargo on United States, and that meant changing the free market conditions. Okay, they were trading back and forth, and then all of a sudden United States puts an embargo on Japan. Japan puts an embargo on United States so that they can change their conditions. Okay, maybe taxes, tariffs, an increase or an opening of a frontier, the signing of a new treaty in some specific matter may suppose a change in free market conditions. Okay, the second one in static effects is productivity of firms. All right, maybe they find a new technology. All of these has to do with supply changes, remember, in the curves. So if they find a new technology and they can be more productive, let's say in agriculture, it's not the same to cultivate things from a very traditional way and then changing it to a more sophisticated technological machinery, then obviously that's going to give you a change in the GDP, especially when it's very, very massive. Remember, the difference between microeconomics is that in microeconomics we were seeing the individual and the little businesses or one company, how they behaved in the competitive market. Now in macroeconomics, we're watching the whole picture, the big picture. So we're gonna talk about regions or countries. All right, we're not only going to talk about one specific consumer behavior or one specific provider behavior. We're going to talk about the whole picture. That's why we're talking about these indicators. And the GDP is key for you to understand all these macroeconomic terms. All right, and the third one that we may classify as an static effect is a change in consumer behavior. Let's say all these people are now, well, we talked about that when we were changing the demand curve. Okay, everything that has to do with consumers is changing the demand curve. All right, so it's shifting it to upward or downward. So let's say, our example of the straws in beverages, like 10 years ago, every single restaurant, every single business, cafe or bar, they would give you the straw with the beverage. And now, like 10 years after, due to all these taking conscience of the environment and how we pollute, then we have taken that out. So practically right now, no businesses are giving you a straw. It's like they're not even being produced, okay, in some factories. So we have a change in consumer behavior, and that's going to shift, okay, our GDP growth rate. It is going to impact. And then on the other side, we have the shocks. Okay, the shocks are, as its name implies, something that we did not expected. For example, the pandemic, or some unpredictable events like natural disasters or terrorist attacks. Obviously, the books include terrorist attacks because in 2001, remember September 11, when the Twin Towers, it basically changed many things in the United States, and one of the things that it impacted was the economic growth. These are shocks because now then the economy was all focused on war against terrorism, once a war against terror under Bush son, and well, the economy changed and shifted towards that end. All right, so that's what we have to say about what causes the growth or the decline of the GDP. We have static effects and we have shocks. Ready? Now, we're gonna see growth. Okay, now also we have that the growth is caused by some economic indicators. We usually calculate it like that. Income goes up, employment goes up, wages, your minimum salary as we call it in Mexico, or the people buying consumers buying more goods and services all over the place. So these are increase in economic indicators. These indicators are going to tell us if the GDP is going to grow or not. These are taken into account in the real GDP. We have to make sure that whenever we are talking about this business cycle, we use the indicator of real GDP, because then they have come up with other GDPs when they calculate other types of indicators, and the truth is that they are more inaccurate. So for more accuracy, for more exactitude, we want to use the real GDP when we're talking about everything. When we are doing a research, when you go to college or university and you're making a research, you make sure you are finding the real GDP, not whatever other GDP, the figure GDP or the national GDP, or none other GDP is as accurate as the real GDP, okay? So income, employment, wages, and the buy of goods and services are going to impact directly on the growth of the economy, okay? And that's the first one, right? You copy this one, and so the first part of the curve is growth, okay? Until we get to a peak, we're growing. And that growth is triggered by this: income, employment, wages, buy of goods and services. Now we go to the second stage, okay? Where the only thing we're doing is going up up to the curve, and each of these words are going to mean a phase in the business cycle, right? So now we have the peak. The peak is the maximum limit of growth that is attained, okay, where an economy cannot grow anymore. The economic indicators do not grow farther and are at their highest, all right? That's basically why we call it the peak, because it's that's the highest point in your curve. You cannot go even further. You're at your maximum capacity. Prices are at their peak. That's also very important because due to the demand and supply laws, if something goes up, let's say the income of the consumers, then demand, the whole curve of demand is going up. That means there's a scarcity of goods and services that is going to drive the providers to produce more stuff to meet the demand of the consumers, and that's gonna give you, okay, that's gonna give you the your peak. The consumers are consuming at their highest, providers are producing at their highest, and so we're having all machines going at full speed. We cannot go higher than the peak, okay? This stage marks the reversal point in the trend of economic growth. You can watch it, you can see it as a roller coaster too. The first stage is like the growing. Now, when you get into a roller coaster, you start going up very, very slowly over time, and then it gets to a point where you know it stalls, and you know precisely that things are gonna get very fast and very, very hype, okay? And consumers tend to restructure their budgets at this point. Now, this is very important for you to know. Remember that economics is the science of decisions. And this is pretty catchy because no function, no mathematical statistics can give you the precise amount or the precise time in which we're going to encounter a recession. We cannot foresee it so accurately. If we could, we would be doing better in any economic crisis. The truth is that we cannot foresee with accuracy all of these things because this economics is a social science. And being a social science is not, by definition, an exact science, a hard science. Physics, mathematics, even though they use a lot of inferences from the real world, the fact is that you can get a nice result, a nice accurate result. When you talk about social sciences, since we're talking about people here, and people have many kinds of motivations that drive their behavior, we cannot foresee for sure the generality of decisions or how their paths are going to shape. So that's why recessions, peaks, and all these economic things that are decisions, they're basically decisions of people over a period of time. They cannot be foreseen so easily, okay? So consumers start to restructure their budgets at this point. It's like whenever you find a new business that you like, or you find a restaurant. It happens to me a lot. I find a nice restaurant and I really like it, and I start going a lot. And usually the nice things will cost some money. You start shaping your habits. So you start going, you start spending a lot of money. And then after an enough period of time in which you realize that maybe that spending is not totally necessary, you restructure your thinking. Instead of going for coffee at a Starbucks every single day, you start saying, well, I'm gonna cut down because I'm allocating just so much money towards these that is not even a basic need, that I'm gonna cut back in my consumption, and probably I'm gonna dedicate or allocate that money for some other expense. Okay, people start restructuring. When you start having an expense for a long period of time, let's say a month or 2 months or 3 months, then you start thinking, because it starts impacting your economy, your pocket economy. And so everybody is going through that process, everybody is doing the same thing, and so we have a pattern, and that pattern drives a generality, and then that's when we have these significant changes in the economy and the GDP. Okay? I'm gonna take a little sip of water. Hold on. Already. Let's see. Do we draw the face of the business cycle? Yes. I'm gonna upload the presentation either way in your Moodle so that you can have it. But remember that I always like you to upload your notes. So your notebook has to be complete for one of the activities that you're gonna be graded on for the third partial, okay? So yes, you have to draw it. If you didn't get to draw it, Edgar or anybody, I'm gonna upload the presentation in Moodle as soon as I get offline. Teacher, I'm Alan Leal, in case your name is. Okay, don't worry, Alan. I usually do not name list, but I mean, you need to understand the concept so that you can do the activities, all right? As of right now, we only have one activity for economics, and it's the population pyramid. All right, so you make sure you have already sent me that. The deadline was yesterday. All right, so let's go back to the presentation and let's look at this. All right, and the third one and the last one that I want to see with you today is the recession, okay? In a recession, we have an economy that has already contracted. I'm going to go back a little. I'm going to return to this slide. Okay, you see, we're going to have a trough. You see, there's the actual GDP here. Then we have a peak. We are going up to the highest. And that, as our definition says, marks the reversal of the growth. Now, people are taking more care of their economy. Maybe they're saving up. And remember, even if in first world countries, not everybody saves up in an account, in a bank. All right, so that's that. People start having money, and because they start having money, they change their habits. And that is going to impact the GDP. Maybe they're saving. Now that they have an excess of earnings, now they're saving. And that saving thing, even though it's nice and we should have a habit of savings, now for the economy in the short term is gonna cost naturally, not because it's bad and we should stop saving, of course not, I'm not saying that, but it starts making a reversal. And so the line goes down and now we have a trough. And this trough, now pay attention, okay? This trough may represent a recession or may not, okay? Remember, the economy is cyclical. So it is okay and it is natural that we go to a trough. If we stay in the trough for more than 6 months, so the theory says, we are in an actual recession. A recession such as the 1994 recession here in Mexico and in the world, or such as the 1986 recession in Mexico too, and the United States. But if we go over and we get out of this trough in the curve, then we are not actually in a recession. We only present recessionary traits. Okay, that's very important for you to know. Okay, the demand for goods and services starts declining, obviously, rapidly and steadily in this phase. And that's how we go to the exact opposite of the peak. We have the trough. Okay, producers do not notice the decrease in demand instantly. Obviously, you never know, you cannot foresee. People, for instance, facing this pandemic, a lot of businesses were open in this January or this February. They were doing their inauguration ceremonies and parties. And now they didn't know, obviously, that a month later they had to close down. So all that investment is just going bananas, okay? It's just going to hell right now. Nothing is working as they expected it. So this is very, very significant. Producers do not notice a decrease in demand instantly. You have no way of seeing if your product is going to keep on selling forever and ever at a steady pace, even if it's something that you're recurrent, okay, a recurrent buyer, or a renewable thing. It's not like buying a deodorant. You know that if you sell deodorants and you capture the attention and the loyalty of 100,000 consumers, they probably, at least like 80 or 70,000 of those consumers are going to keep on buying the same deodorant, because it's scientifically proven that nobody likes to change deodorant or shampoo. All right, some goods and services are more, they're easier to put in a forecast, but others aren't at all. Okay, so producers do not notice the decrease in demand instantly and go on producing, which creates a situation of excess. Remember, the excess of supply. Then again, we have to have at hand the curves of demand and supply, because they're very, very important. Okay, just as we shifted the supply and the prices go down, or we shift the demand and the prices go up. Okay, this is exactly how this is working. The producers cannot tell exactly when the consumers are going to stop buying, so they keep producing at the same pace, having that we just had a peak and everybody's traveling, or everybody's buying cars, or everybody is buying houses. Then what's that going to produce? Well, the providers want to sell more houses. So if I sell houses and I see that during 2 years people have been acquiring their new homes, then I keep on building. And you know that the real estate market is not something that it's not like a brownie company that I make brownies today and in the afternoon I start selling them, and maybe by the end of the day they're gone. I mean, housing is like a long-term enterprise, a long-term project. So these people start building all over the place, and if you do not have enough demand to buy those houses, then you're in big trouble. And not only you are as a provider in big trouble, and you stay with all your apartments and your houses not being sold, but also you are causing an overproduction of goods, which shifts the supply up, and which marks an area, above the equilibrium point, because we are not having equilibrium. So all of those things drive now the suppliers to diminish things and raise prices. They diminish production, which means they have to lay off people because they cannot keep on working at the same pace. People are not buying at the same pace. And so that means that a lot of people are going to go unemployed. That diminishes the income, that shifts the demand curve, that drives prices up, and we have a recession. If these last for more than 6 months, we have a formal recession. If it doesn't last 6 months, then we only have a recessionary crisis. It's different, okay? It's very, very different. And so prices tend to fall. All positive economic indicators such as income, output, wages, etc. consequently start falling down. Okay? And then what goes next is that it starts all over again. Yes? So we have a peak, then we have a trough, and then when you hit bottom, just as in life crisis, when you hit rock bottom, then you go up again. Okay? People change again their consumer habits, and then you have like a slope upward. Yes? Do you have any questions, guys, for me up to this point right now? I am seeing that you are lagged behind. Okay, so right now we are going to have questions if you have any. If you don't, this is it for today. This weekend there's another activity in Moodle and you need to check it, okay? It's gonna talk about the business cycles and how the GDP in Mexico is going to affect us, okay? Now, let me just change something here. Okay, now you're seeing my screen and I want to show you, okay, we're going to look for the GDP, now the applications, the GDP growth Mexico, okay, and so we're going to examine this. Let me see, this is 1994 and 2020 information. No, I want a graph. This is the GDP per capita. Okay. Let's see, let's find it. How it's our fluctuations. Oh, this is the same one. That's a forecasted. Let's see if this has Santa Madre del Huerto. This is the present. I don't want to believe this. So I'm being in denial. Let's see. I want like real numbers as a forecast. Let's see if we can find it somewhere. See, though all of these are indicators. So economics works with a lot of indicators all the time, okay? Here we go. Fund chart GDP growth. This is 2013. Here we go. This is something like that. If you graph all the GDPs over the years, you're gonna get the graph that looks like a heart exam. Where is it? Oh, here. Right? You have this chart that looks like a heart thingy. Now here's 2013 and this is 2020. Obviously here they put all these like forecasted lines because we don't know still how this is going to go. Here in 1918 we had a draft, we had an upward slope, and remember, I mean, this gives you a lot of objectivity when talking about politics, because sometimes, as I already mentioned, a lot of good presidents and good administrators and economists in the government, they have a very good reputation and it gets ruined because they only face a trough in the economic cycle. So independently on who is in charge, economy has a cycle. It goes up, it goes down. It has peaks, it has troughs, okay? No matter who is in charge. Now, obviously, people that are in charge can make things worse or can make things better. And that we can make people accountable for. Yes, and especially when you're voting for that someone. Yes, so that here's these. Doesn't look good. We knew that already. I think it's very it's very obvious that things are going to happen like this. Mexican economy into technical recession in the first half of the year. Percentage variation in Mexican GDP in quantities. 2004 here and 2019. here. We're being, and obviously when you have, a nice thing when you graph the peaks and the troughs is that you have like an average. So everything that is above average, even if it's going down, it's still okay. What is very bad is when you go down the average. Everything that, any activity that goes below the average, which is this line here, the equilibrium, the 0% point, that means that the economy is just staying the same, remaining the same, then obviously this is very bad. In 2009, we had a very, very bad year, and now here. We never want a negative percentage, because that means the economy is contracting. We don't want economy to contract. It may be due to many reasons. For example, in European countries, as we've seen with the population pyramids, if you have a contraction or a diminishing population, obviously over the years, over the decades, you're going to have a negative percentage in the gross domestic product. And that's going to be natural. That's going to be something that you expect, because it's how things work. But if you have your population replacing themselves over the years, there's no need, or it's very bad that you have a negative percentage. Okay? Listo. Well, if you don't have, what says David de la Cerda, GDP is in dollars everywhere? Yes, it is in real dollars, USA dollars. Okay? Yes, so if nobody has any question, this is it for today. Thank you for your attention. I hope you've understood everything that we have explained today. And if not, you can call me, you can text me, or you can just show me your concerns as in a personal message, okay? So have a nice ending of the evening, and be good, guys. Tomorrow we don't have class. Yeah, we only have class Mondays and Thursdays, okay? So tomorrow, either way, you don't have class with any teacher, but even with me, you never had class on Fridays, okay? So have a nice free day, and thank you for everything. Goodbye, guys. Mm-hmm.